She was just 65 yards from home, alive while clutching a purple dolphin toy. Police had been inside the house twice while she was hidden in the closet. They even heard noises and dismissed them as raccoons or God knows what. 9-year-old Jessica Lunsford vanished from her bed weeks before. Only after finding her tiny body did the system ask how a man like John Evander Cooey could live so close to children. By then, it was too late for Jessica. But Jessica's death wasn't just another tragedy. It became a revolution. Her small fingers breaking through that plastic bag ripped holes in an entire system. 2 of her fingers broke through the plastic, pushing desperately towards freedom. Freedom that never came. When they found Jessica Lunsford's body in the shallow grave behind John Cooey's trailer, she was still clutching her purple dolphin, the stuffed animal her father had won for her at the Florida State Fair just days before she vanished. In her final moments, as soil pressed down from above and oxygen disappeared, that dolphin was her only comfort. She'd just 65 yards away from her bedroom window. 65 yards, the length of 2/3 of a football field, a 1-minute walk, so close that her kidnapper could see her home from his window, so close that he beat her as search teams walked past, oblivious to the horror unfolding behind a makeshift police command tent that ironically blocked the view of where she was being alive. So close that twice, police officers stood inside the same house where she was hidden, failing to check the closet where she silently waited, hoping for rescue. Jessica Lunsford isn't just a tragedy. She is a devastating reminder of how systems fail, how monsters hide in plain sight, and how the smallest changes can mean the difference between life and death. Jessica Marie Lunsford, Jessie to everyone who knew her, was born October 6, 1995. By all accounts, she was sunshine in human form.
I took care of her from the time she was born. I wouldn't have traded Jessie for a pot of gold. She was my pot of gold.
She lived with her father, Mark, and grandparents, Ruth and Archie, in a modest mobile home in Homasa, Florida. Her parents had separated when she was just a year old. Her mother moved to Ohio, remarried, and had another child. Mark became Jessica's everything, her hero, her protector, her world. But on Mark's end, it wasn't easy to be a single dad. So he moved back in with his parents to give Jessie the best start in life he could. Mark worked long hours as a dump truck driver to provide for his daughter, sometimes 15 to 20-hour shifts. But whenever he was home, those moments belonged to Jessie. They'd ride his motorcycle together, her small arms wrapped tightly around his waist, face lit up with pure joy. They were a unit.
I can't explain how deep I felt towards Jessie, and Jessie felt the same way. And her with her daddy, they were inseparable.
At school, Jessie thrived. She made friends easily, earned good grades, and sang in the church choir at Faith Baptist. She played with the family dog, Corky, and she dreamed big. Depending on the day, Ruth would later recall, she wanted to either be a fashion designer or an Olympic swimmer. Every Wednesday, like clockwork, Jessie attended church with family friend Sharon Armstrong, who then tutored her. That particular Wednesday, February 23, 2005, they had practiced sign language. As Jessie reached her front door at 9 p.m., she turned back to Sharon and signed, "I love you." That was the last time Sharon would ever see her. That night, Mark returned from a grueling shift. Despite his exhaustion, he spent time with Jessie watching TV as she jumped playfully on the couch. Around 10 p.m., Ruth decided it was time for bed. Following their nightly ritual, she helped Jessie into her favorite pink nightgown, tucked her in, said prayers together, and kissed her goodnight. Mark had plans to stay at his girlfriend's home that night. He'd return early the next morning to get Jessie ready for school before starting another long shift. He had no way of knowing that by morning, his daughter's bed would be empty, and that his life was about to shatter into a million pieces. February 24th, 2005, 6 a.m. Mark Lunsford returned home, hearing Jessie's alarm clock blaring through her closed bedroom door. Strange. She was usually quick to shut it off. He went to his room, got ready for work, but the persistent alarm nagged at him. He opened her door. The bed was empty. Her school clothes remained neatly folded where they'd been laid out the night before. Nothing seemed disturbed or out of place, except Jessie was gone, and so was her pink nightgown and her purple dolphin.
I got a big lump in my throat, and I woke my parents up. I thought maybe she was in bed with them.
She wasn't. Ruth and Archie had heard nothing unusual during the night. The family quickly searched the house, finding nothing. This wasn't a runaway situation. Jessie was terrified of the dark. There was no way she would voluntarily walk into the darkness outside. Someone had taken her.
Emergency? Yes, we got a child missing. How old's the child? 9.
Mark jumped in his car, frantically driving neighborhood roads with his windows down, screaming his daughter's name at the top of his lungs. The desperate sound echoed through the empty streets as dawn broke over Homosassa. No answer came. Within hours, Citrus County Sheriff's deputies flooded the area. They would remain there nonstop for the next month. Officers searched on foot, helicopters scanned from above, dive teams checked nearby bodies of water, mounted units covered more ground. Scent dogs tried to pick up Jessie's trail but lost it near the road, suggesting she'd been taken away in a vehicle. Deputy Juan Santiago vacuumed the entire house for evidence, taking photographs, searching for any clue as to what happened to Jessie.
I didn't see any footprints around the residence. I did not notice any pry marks. I did not notice any signs of struggle.
Yet even as this massive search operation unfolded, Jessica Lunsford was just 65 yards away, alive in a closet across the street. The community mobilized with shocking speed. Hundreds of volunteers gathered each morning at Faith Baptist Church, Jessie's church, splitting into search teams that covered massive areas. Local businesses donated supplies, neighbors put their lives on hold to join in the effort. The FBI joined the investigation, bringing additional resources. Jessie's face appeared on every television screen across America. Former Atlanta Braves pitcher Mike Hamilton, whose son was in Jessie's class, offered a $25,000 reward for her safe return. That reward eventually grew to $115,000 as donations poured in. Even the U.S. Postal Service stepped up, delivering Deliver Me Home flyers to over 100,000 homes in the area. Meanwhile, the police were busy looking at Mark as the main suspect. Because there were no signs of struggle at the scene, they believed Jessie left with someone she knew that night. They interrogated him over and over again, even when his girlfriend told them he was with her that night. And when they found out that he'd been accused of inappropriate behavior by his ex-wife, they pressed him even harder. So he took a polygraph test to end this once and for all. Once the police were satisfied, they jumped onto Archie, Jessie's grandpa.
Are you sure that you didn't do something to Jessie that you're ashamed of? Don't you feel like you ought to tell us about it?
They interrogated him for weeks, almost like they wanted to force a confession out of him so that they could end the case. The investigators even tried to convince Mark that his dad was guilty. They had Mark question his dad as if they already had DNA evidence against him. When Mark realized he'd been manipulated, this broke him even harder.
I'm sorry, Dad. No, just forgive me. I'll hear you.
And that's not even the end of the police incompetence in this case. Sheriff Jeff Dossie established a 24-hour command center directly in front of the Lunsford home. The irony would later become unbearable. This command center, with its tents and vehicles, partially blocked the view of the trailer where Jessie was being held. The same trailer police visited twice while she was inside. Media trucks lined the streets. Mark made desperate pleas on camera. "I don't care who you are. Drop her off at the corner. Call me. I'll come get her. She belongs at home." Weeks into the search, after several visits to the Lunsford home, Detective Holder processed the Lunsford home, noting the cut of the screen door beside the handle. Finally, they found reason to extend their search. They began checking registered offenders in the area. There were 208 in Citrus County alone, with 50 living in zip codes surrounding Jessie's home. One name stood out, a man who wasn't at his registered address, a man whose sister lived just 65 yards from the Lunsford home, a man with a long history of crimes against children. John Evander Cooey, aged 46, convicted with a 30-year criminal history spanning 24 arrests. And he'd suddenly left town within days of Jessie's disappearance. On March 14th, deputies searched the home of Cooey's sister, Dorothy Dixon, where he had been living. Inside his bedroom, they found blood-stained mattresses and pillows. Outside, a ladder leaned against his window. By then, it was already too late for Jessie. While hundreds searched, while helicopters hovered overhead, while police established their command post virtually within eyesight. Jessica Lunsford was being held captive a mere stone's throw from her own bedroom. The monster responsible wasn't some distant stranger. He was John Cooey, a neighbor who had watched her play in her yard, who knew which trailer was hers, who knew her routine. They found and arrested him in Augusta, Georgia. Cooey later confessed that around 3 a.m. on February 24th, he entered the Lunsford home through the unlocked front door. He claimed he initially intended only to burglarize the home, but when he saw Jessie asleep in her bed, he woke her up. He told her to be quiet and follow him. He let her take just one thing, her purple dolphin, and that small comfort would remain with her until her last breath. Cooey led Jessie 65 yards to his sister's trailer, where he helped her climb through his bedroom window, using the ladder that investigators would later photograph from the Lunsford home. What happened next is the stuff of nightmares. For 3 days, maybe even longer, Cooey repeatedly ate 9-year-old Jessie. When he wasn't her, he locked her in the closet of his bedroom. The most devastating part? Police came to the trailer twice while Jessie was inside. On February 24th, the very day she disappeared, officers visited the trailer to question residents about the missing girl. Cooey wasn't at home, and they looked through each room but never opened the closet where Jessie was hidden. They returned the next day. Cooey was there but slipped out back to avoid questioning. Again, officers failed to thoroughly search the home, and again they missed the closet. Whatever noises they heard were too faint and coming from too far away to care about. Imagine the hope that must have surged through Jessie when she heard police voices. The crushing despair when they left without finding her. Cooey later told investigators, "For some reason they came to my house, but they didn't come in and search. I wish they would have, because they would have found her." Dorothy Dixon, Cooey's sister, lived in the trailer, and so did her boyfriend, Matt Dittrich, her daughter, Maddie Secord, and Maddie's husband, Gene. 4 adults in a small trailer while a kidnapped child was hidden in a closet. All claimed they heard and saw nothing unusual. As police presence in the neighborhood intensified and search dogs were brought in, Cooey panicked. On that 3rd day, he told Jessie he was going to take her home to her family. It was a cruel lie. He convinced Jessie to hide in the trash bag, claiming it was to prevent anyone from seeing her. She willingly climbed in, believing she was finally going home, and instead, Cooey took one bag over her head, another over her feet, and knotted them in the middle. In the middle of the night, he carried her outside to a hole that he had dug behind the trailer, directly across from the police command center. He dug her in and began shoveling dirt over her. Jessica Lunsford was alive, just 65 yards from her own bedroom. On March 18th, after Cooey's confession, Deputy Holder cornered off the area behind Dixon's trailer. Investigators removed the wooden deck on the east side of the home. Tex Spittle found the same ladder that had been against Cooey's window, now lying beside a shovel with fresh dirt on the blade. They began to dig. At 4 a.m. on March 19th, 24 days after Jessie disappeared, they found her. As Cooey had described, she was wrapped in 2 garbage bags. 2 of her fingers had poked through the plastic, evidence of her desperate struggle to escape. When they opened the bags, they found her wrists bound with speaker wire. In her arms, clutched tightly to her chest, was her purple dolphin. Medical examiner Stephen Cogswell confirmed that Jessie had been repeatedly. Her cause of death was she likely survived only 2 to 3 minutes after being buried. Her position showed that she had willingly stepped into the bags, believing Cooey's lie that she was going home. Her stomach was completely empty. She'd barely been fed during her captivity. Traces of were found on her body, though toxicology showed she hadn't ingested any. The belonged to Cooey, who had been heavily using drugs throughout the ordeal. DNA testing later confirmed everything. Bloodstains on the mattress, pillows, and in the closet all matched Jessie. One sample from the bed contained a mixture of DNA that belonged to both Jessie and Cooey, further proving the Her thumbprints were found on a pizza box in the closet where she'd been held. She had touched the glass tabletop that the police later removed from the home. She had been there all along, so tantalizingly close to rescue. Sheriff Dawsey, who had led the investigation, was devastated. He told the Lunsfords, "I'm so sorry I didn't bring back hope to your lives." For the officers who had visited that trailer while Jessie was alive inside, the guilt would be unbearable. They had been a mere feet away from saving her. On March 21, 2005, John Evander Cooey was arrested and charged with burglary and kidnapping, and murder. Police also arrested Dorothy Dixon, Maddie Secord, Matt Dittrich, and Jean Secord on obstruction charges. They had known Cooey was in Georgia, but hadn't told authorities. The case against Cooey seemed airtight, but the legal process encountered hurdles. His confession was deemed inadmissible because he had requested an attorney 8 times during questioning, but was ignored. Finding an impartial jury in Citrus County proved impossible. After 21 weeks of trying, the trial was moved to Miami. Cooey's defense claimed he was cognitively impaired with an IQ of 64, below the legal threshold of 70 for mental disability. They argued his brain had been damaged by childhood and years of use. The prosecution countered with their own experts, who found Cooey's IQ to be 78. Former employers testified he handled chemicals, operated heavy machinery, and followed complex instructions, tasks beyond someone truly impaired. But just look at Mark's face watching his daughter's killer in court. IQ scores and childhood trauma seemed to falter in moments like these. Nothing, absolutely nothing, excuses what Cooey did to Jesse. On March 7, 2007, after a trial lasting over a month, the jury found him guilty on all counts. By a vote of 10-2, they recommended the death penalty.
And I thought, yes.
But Cooey would never face on September 30th, 2009, at the age of 51, he died from colon cancer while in prison. Mark Lunsford's reaction was mixed. It's a burden off your shoulders. Now I no longer have to think about his efforts for his next appeal, but he quickly refocused. So what? There's still 600,000 more offenders in the country. Justice for Jesse wasn't just about punishing one man. It was about ensuring no other child would suffer her fate. Mark Lunsford turned unimaginable grief into unstoppable purpose. Within weeks of Jesse's body being found, he began lobbying for tougher offender laws. What infuriated him most? Cooey had received a 10-year sentence for his first offense, but served only 2 years. He was a registered offender, yet he walked freely through neighborhoods filled with children. He even worked as a contractor for a local school. No one checked his background. Police also had a warrant for his arrest 2 weeks before Jesse's disappearance, but never executed it. The system had failed his daughter at every turn. On May 2nd, 2005, just 2 months after Jesse was found, Florida Governor Jeb Bush signed the Jessica Lunsford Act into law. It mandated sweeping changes. Offenders must report to sheriff's offices twice yearly to verify their addresses, with failure to do so becoming a felony. Mandatory 25-year minimum sentences for first-time offenders who target children, with lifetime monitoring afterward, extending the time offenders could petition to have their names removed from 20 years to 30. Mark didn't stop with Florida. He quit his job and became a full-time activist. He traveled the country on his motorcycle with Jesse's face on his jacket, lobbying state after state to adopt similar laws. 20 years later, 46 states have passed their own versions of Jessica's law. Only 4 holdouts remain, and Mark will not rest until all 50 have adopted it. But laws were just the beginning. In 2008, the Citrus County Sheriff's Office partnered with the Lunsford family to open Jesse's Place, a child advocacy center where abused and neglected children receive support, forensic interviews, medical exams, and therapy.
These child advocacy centers are meant to be a comfort zone for the child.
As Sheriff David Vincent explained in a recent interview marking the 20th anniversary.
When we move forward with things like the Tree of Life that's behind me here, it's just making sure that no one ever forgets of why we put safeguards in place and why we want to protect children.
This impact is immeasurable. How many children were saved because an offender was properly monitored? How many received appropriate sentences instead of early release? How many vulnerable kids found safety at advocacy centers modeled after Jesse's Place? We'll never know the exact numbers, but we know it's working. The procedural changes implemented after Jesse's case are now standard practice. Thorough searches of all closets and concealed spaces, stricter protocols for checking offender compliance, and better coordination between agencies. Small changes that might have saved Jesse are now saving others. 20 years later, Mark Lunsford has a 17-year-old son who shares a birthday with Jesse. He feels his daughter's presence still.
And then there's times that you talk to yourself, and then in your own voice, you talk back with an answer. That's God or the ones you lost. They're giving you the answer.
65 yards. That's how far Jessica Lunsford was from safety when she died. It's the distance between tragedy and rescue, between a system that fails and one that protects. Jessica's story isn't just about how systems fail, it's about how they can change, how they must change. Because 65 yards might as well be 1,000,000 miles if the right protections aren't in place. 20 years after her death, Jessica Lunsford's legacy lives on in every child who comes home safely, in every properly monitored, in every victim who finds healing at centers like Jesse's Place. Her father, Mark, put it best.
These are your kids too.
Jessica's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Would you support lifetime imprisonment for all child offenders, even first-time offenders? Should police be legally required to search every closet when investigating missing children? Would you want to know if a offender lived on your street? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This case haunts me because Jessica was so close to being saved. If this video moved you, please hit like and subscribe to support more stories that need to be told. Check out my next heartbreaking story on screen now. And please keep your loved ones close. Stay safe.